Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock podcast. Proceed at your own risk, and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome to Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming, what's playing in theaters, and what's happening in this universe of entertainment. I'm Aljon Go, lifelong Disney fan and pop culturist, and you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, and author, broadcasting from beautiful New York City. Welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our very own Skull Rock YouTube channel. You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon, first and foremost, I am going to say apologies to our listeners last week because we're transitioning to a new platform, and we had some technical difficulties, and that's all we can say about it. Aljon and I are, I'll speak for myself. I'm just a knucklehead trying to do a podcast, and, platforms change, software changes, and things happen. Right, Aljon? So, we had a little bit of a snafu last week. I think we're back on track this week. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But other than that, Aljon, it is snowing like crazy here in New York.
I saw that, Dave. I saw that. So you missed maybe some of the snow for the White Christmas, but you're making up for it now a month later.
And I got to tell you, I was in New York. It was New York City. I was at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, for an animation master's screening hosted by John Canemaker, who's a previous guest of ours here on the Skull Rock Podcast. Afterwards, he did a signing of his new book, The Art of John Canemaker, An Animator's Garden, which is available now. And if you want to get a signed copy, by the way, folks, go to theoldmillpress.com, and it's an absolutely beautiful book. But I also met a lot of fantastic folks. They actually moved the screening from a smaller theater at MoMA into the large theater at MoMA. And it was filled, Aljon. Good. Filled to the brim, because there are so many people out there that love animation and vintage animation. I mean, we saw some Crazy Cat cartoon, a Felix the Cat cartoon, Mutt and Jeff, Gertie the Dinosaur. We saw Dig by Faith and John Hubley. We saw a couple of John Canemaker's films that are part of the MoMA collection. It was wonderful. And the silent cartoons, they had a pianist. They had a guy playing the piano who accompanied the cartoons, and he was absolutely brilliant.
That's
absolutely awesome. Brilliant. I mean, it was just all around. It was a fantastic day in New York City. When I came out of Penn Station, it was snowing these large, the large fluffy flakes that are just kind of gliding down. It really was picturesque. I mean,
wow,
dreamlike almost. I mean, it was so fantastic.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where I am, folks.
Well, I'm glad that you're here for one. And I'm glad that, John's project had so many people that they had to move it to a larger theater, as it should be. It should be like that. And the more people, support this and discover things like this of, different generations can experience this, the better. There's always something you can learn. And I would wish I could have been there myself to experience it, because I'm a really big fan of those classic cartoons. And I can only imagine, John may be doing this as he is. He's a teacher. And I can only imagine him kind of delving through trying to find the original pianist scores for some of these silent shorts that he was able to kind of unearth and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Restore, right, Dave? I mean,
yeah, MoMA did digital restorations of all of these cartoons. They're really wonderful. And by the way, some of them were courtesy of Mark Kausler, who's a past guest of ours on Skull Rock Podcast. So, I saw Mark's name up in the credits on some of those, which was absolutely wonderful to see.
Right.
The other thing, Aljon, I met listeners,
Oh,
people that listen to the Skull Rock podcast, and
cool.
I've met colleagues, and I've met people I'm Facebook friends with who I never met before who came up and introduced themselves.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was really just a fun afternoon and visiting with a lot of different people. I saw some former colleagues from the studio and just, some wonderful people. Jake Friedman, who's written a wonderful book about Art Babbitt and the Disney strike back in the 40s. Just some really terrific people. And it was a wonderful afternoon of watching animation with a community of people. I mean, I have to say to our listeners, if you get wherever you are, if you ever see that they're going to be screening vintage cartoons and have a piano player or a small orchestra, just go see that because it's a wonderful experience. I guarantee you'll enjoy it.
That's amazing. I'm glad. I hope they can perhaps take this on the road. Who knows what's going to happen, but I'm glad that there was at least a screening of some of these vintage, projects, these vintage pieces. And it's great that we're able to get them restored and back into the public for people to enjoy. So it's always great.
And Aljon, we're back in the saddle. I'm confident that we're not going to have technical issues this week.
Me too.
And we're going to be showcasing part 2 of our interview with Ed Nowak, the former Deputy General Counsel of the Walt Disney Company. And I re-listen to the show every week, and I got to tell you, it's just a fascinating conversation talking with Ed, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. I love the guy. He's a friend, and it's just wonderful talking with him and hearing some of these stories.
It really is. I mean, it's another aspect that we fans don't necessarily think about all the time, but it's really so integral to the operation of the company. And a lot of times the stuff that's being put out, right? It does affect the people that put out these projects and the consumers that happen to partake in the project. So it's really fascinating, especially the fact that he's a musician. And I really would have loved to ask him a lot of questions about his time being a musician. But that's
I tell you. I said it on the show. I think of Ed as an artist first and a lawyer second.
Well, it's great to have those kind of people that know about art and music and media as they kind of take that expertise with them with their highly specialized, legal degree. They're able to understand a little bit more. And I think it's really cool that you have artists like that are involved and are knowledgeable about all different facets of the art as they go in to protect the legal IP and different things like that. So pretty cool stuff for sure. All right, Dave. So before we get into it, I know we've got a lot of things to get into today, but I want to encourage our fans out there, listeners, please give us those 5-star reviews. Please check us out on our YouTube channel and on Spotify. Those are we're everywhere on every podcast platform, but I just wanted to do that housekeeping because the YouTube channel is blowing up, which is really cool. We put out some shorts last week. Dave kind of made fun of the fact that says you need to check out our shorts. And the short video content. Gang.
Let's go, folks. Check your shorts here. Okay.
There's thousands of people that already checked it out. And I was able to put up some clips of our past couple of weeks of us using our new platform. And then also some content with Kat and I over the holiday. We were talking about some John Williams stuff that we covered on the show as she checked out the John Williams live at the Hollywood Bowl, which was really cool. So please check out our shorts station, our channel for that.
Pam, she wrote this great review of my poetry book.
That's my pick.
I read a great review.
Your girlfriend got a great review.
Oh, that's my pick, too. Sorry.
Excuse me while I start the projector.
Skull Rock Podcast, Picks of the Week.
Well, this has been an incredibly busy week, I have to tell you. I've been bouncing all over the place, but I want to mention one show. And look, I've I keep watching episodes of Landman on Paramount Plus when it drops. It's a fantastic show. I think season 2 is even better than season 1, and I loved season 1. So there's my endorsement of Landman. But I started watching a new show. You may remember this show, Aljon. We talked about it years ago. Tom Hiddleston, The Night Manager.
Loved it.
Right? The first season was fantastic, but the first season was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So Tom Hiddleston stars in The Night Manager season 2, and I have to tell you, the first episode was gripping. It was really well put together, and we've watched 2 episodes so far, and it's just an absolutely fantastic show. So I highly recommend The Night Manager, which I believe is on Amazon Prime.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and folks, just realize I'm totally unprepared. I'm on the road, and it's just been a whirlwind, and I'm going to talk a little bit why I'm a bit unprepared a little later in our news segment. But
No, it's all good. Yes. On Prime, and once again, Tom Hiddleston and an awesome cast. You've got Olivia Colman and Jan Hanna is in there, and one of my favorites, Hugh Laurie. A lot of people in that particular show. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it's really a fantastic show. Highly recommend that. That's all I'll talk about this week. Next week, I'll be back in the saddle with more movies and more streaming shows.
No, absolutely. This is going to be a short segment because I didn't see anything this week. I was extremely busy and had a lot of headaches, as Dave kind of alluded to with the show. But nonetheless, thank you so much. And once again, if you have anything you'd love for us to check out, please be sure to let us know. Drop us that email or that voicemail, and we'll check it out in a future episode. All right, Dave. So here we have it. 28 years later, the Bone Temple struggles against Avatar 3 during this Martin Luther King weekend box office. And as I mentioned this episode will drop on Martin Luther King Day. So happy birthday to Martin Luther King. So, Dave, let's talk about this zombie sequel. I was a big fan of 28 Years Later. It came out last year. High drama, high stakes, in my opinion. I really appreciated that. But it looks like, once again, it's going to be hard to topple Avatar Fire and Ash.
That's okay. I've seen 28 days, 28 weeks. Was it 28 weeks or 28 months?
I think it's maybe 28 weeks.
Okay. 28 days, 28 weeks, 28 years. And now it's 28 years, The Bone Temple.
Yes.
And I'm going to go see this movie this week, I promise you, and report back next week on it. I've loved the entire series because it's really well done. And, Aljon, I'm not necessarily into these type of movies, but every once in a while, there's a film that comes along that you could classify as horror in the horror genre. I will go see, and will enjoy. So, look, this has all the makings of, I think, a great movie-going experience. So I'll talk about it next week.
Yes, $5.6 million on Friday, looking to notch about $15 million during the 4-day MLK holiday weekend, according to the Hollywood Reporter. Really good stuff, though, and I appreciate, the director, Director Boyle and writer Alex Garland. Really, really good stuff. And of course, a cast too, which I really appreciate. Ralph Fiennes is in it. Jack O'Connell.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Just fantastic stuff. And of course, the juggernaut that is Avatar 3, now in its 5th weekend, brought in $3.2 million on Friday, ending up maybe with a $17 million. That's a nice projection there. But globally, or domestically, I should say, $353.4 million and more than $1.23 billion globally. That is a huge haul for Avatar and a boon for the film business.
And again, Aljon, it's an absolutely gorgeous movie. You have to see it on a big screen. I saw it a couple weeks ago. I talked about it last week. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. But the first hour drags a bit for me.
Absolutely. Hey, Dave, I forgot to mention in our obituary roll call for last week, we have to say goodbye to MTV.
Are they pulling the plug on MTV?
Plug on MTV. MTV's final final airing over air cable, whatever you want to call it, happened, I guess, New Year's Eve. So New Year's Eve struck midnight on the 1st and MTV shuttered. It is an end of an era, and I have so many fond memories of MTV. In fact, there is someone I think that had brought MTV back, I guess they're calling it MTV Rewind or something, Music Television Revisited, and it's playing like a bunch of different music videos and things. And I said, this is kind of where we're at. People listen and stream videos and music all the time. It's a different era. But back in the day when you couldn't choose, having a station like this connected us and Generation X and Dave, your generation, with a bunch of musicians and music and experiences that people will never forget. I mean, the 80s and 90s were just a huge time for music television.
It really was, but I'm really surprised that they didn't transition it to like YouTube and set up an MTV YouTube channel where you could stream whatever music video you wanted to just by clicking on a tile, and then they just keep adding to it. I'm just surprised that they pulled the plug that quickly and didn't try and do something different with it.
I like the idea of going on YouTube and having MTV as a channel because you can select genres like you would playlist, but actually play the music videos in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that would be great to do that. And it's kind of difficult right now for people. People can put playlists together, but it's a different experience than just kind of putting on the TV and just letting those things kind of play at random and
right.
come looking back. But it is the end of an era for that. Speaking of that, Dave, and I have a lot of fun memories of MTV, but let's look at the streaming ratings. Dave, Stranger Things is doing really great on Netflix, continues the juggernaut ratings for them. Landman, as you said, Dave, another one to watch on Paramount Plus. Wake Up Dead Man, Knives Out at number 3 on Netflix. And there's a lot.
That's a terrific movie, by the way. People should watch that. It's absolutely terrific.
Wonderful stuff there. Now we're going to get into, I guess, some interesting news. I wanted to mention this, Dave. Kathleen Kennedy is out over there at Lucasfilm. Dave Filoni is going to be taking her place. And I wanted to get your bead on what's going on with Kathleen Kennedy kind of stepping down and I guess retiring, if you will. I mean, this comes to us from Variety and Filoni and Lewin Brennan as the new boss of Star Wars, very much mimicking what's going on with, DC, the DC franchise. They have the creative and the business entities kind of separated out with two different people running it. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to say, Aljon, this is just a natural transition, and I completely think they did it in the right way. This has been a long time brewing. Kathleen Kennedy was at the top of the Lucas franchise since Disney purchased it, right?
Yes.
And I think this is, her, look, she's no spring chicken, so she's retiring. And I think that's admirable, and the fact that she's doing it before Iger exits.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting to see how that kind of works out. I mean, Filoni has been named president and chief creative officer and kind of been in that role of heading creative now for the last year, maybe 18 months, kind of the training wheels, if you will, of learning the ropes seemingly in this transition, because we knew this day would happen when he was named part of the creative head of Lucasfilm. And then you also have the films coming out this year, The Mandalorian and Grogu, Star Wars Starfighter that we talked about last week, hitting theaters 26 and 27 respectively. Very interesting time for sure for the studio, but I think it's going to be one of new growth and maybe optimism, maybe for the fandom. I don't know.
Yeah.
We can only hope,
by the way, she's incredibly accomplished. She's 72 years old. She co-founded Amblin Entertainment with Steven Spielberg and Frank Marshall. She's married to Frank Marshall. And they're an incredible couple. And I have to say, I met her once. You know who introduced me to her? Bob Iger introduced me to Kathleen Kennedy. Seriously, and I was coming off the elevator into the rotunda, which is an executive dining room in the Team Disney building, and Bob and Kathleen were just coming up to the elevator, and Bob said, "Hi, Dave, how you doing? This is Kathleen Kennedy." Blah, blah, blah. You know, we just had a few words. It was very nice to meet her. She was very pleasant, but that was really the only time I ever met her.
Wow. Very cool. Well, very interesting stuff. Like I said, I've got a lot of respect. And I think the studios and Disney went through a lot of growing pains trying to figure out what they were going to be or who they were going to become or what audience they were trying to do. But I think they need to get back on track. Let's get back on track and make Star Wars for the masses, right? Let's make Star Wars for the masses. That's all I have to say about that.
You know, listen, I think it's a good idea that they're splitting the creative and the business at the top of the heap there, you know, with Dave Filoni. And who was the executive? I don't know who.
So Brennan, so we have here Lewin Brennan. And Lewin Brennan joined Industrial Light and Magic in 1999, becoming the president in 2009, and became Lucasfilm's president and GM in 2024. And she's part of the strategy and franchise production operations.
You know, look, they're two very seasoned people with the franchise. I think it's probably a good mix.
I do too.
You
know? I'm hopeful. And I really went to the vault. I'm looking through the vault to see if I have any clips of Dave Filoni because, you know, back in my previous podcast years, I've been podcasting since 2009, and I used to get invited to all the Lucasfilm premieres. And we talked to Dave Filoni, and I talked to Dave. He is the nicest, kindest individual. You talk about hockey and he'll just start talking. We talked for maybe 30 minutes about hockey, and he is just so much fun to be around, so knowledgeable and great with the fans and learning. I can't imagine what it's like to learn storytelling, filmmaking from the man, George Lucas himself, because the closest I ever got to George Lucas, Dave, and you probably got much closer than I, but we went to see the Tiki Room together. So that I was tagging along with him and his wife, Melody, and their new child. But when George Lucas was inducted into the D23 Hall of Fame, Kristen and I and a friend, we were right next to him, and we sat down right next to him and his family. And he was listening and singing along to the Tiki Room, you know, the Tiki Room song and everything, and bobbing his head and enjoying it because he's such a fan of Disneyland. And I had a blast. It was so cool.
I think that's awesome. You know, that is just so awesome. Listen, you know, it's a great franchise. I think George Lucas was very, very smart in having Disney purchase it from him while he was still alive to carry it on because it's an incredible franchise and they've got a lot of great stuff ahead of them.
I believe so. I think the best is yet to come. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge timeline expands at Disneyland. Dave, you know, it's interesting. As I remember and I recall Bob Iger and George Lucas at the reopening of Star Tours, they were talking about how all the different timelines, you know, whether it's the prequel trilogy or the original trilogy of films, how people can experience them in new ways. And you might have a cutscene where you're in Star Tours and you're going to Naboo, and then all of a sudden you're going to Bespin, and these parts of the films may not line up canonically, but fun will trump the canon logic of all this because it's all about fun first. And I always stayed with me. And I think that maybe Galaxy's Edge at Star Wars kind of painted itself in a corner by not having some of the more original trilogy characters in the land itself for people to experience. It looks like they're rolling it back because beginning April 29th over at Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland to start, they're going to have Princess Leia, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Darth Vader all going to be there for different meet and greets and character interactions with the fans. And then they're also plugging in John Williams' signature score of Star Wars films throughout the land. Dave, there's been an interesting response from the fandom about it. Most of it very positive. A lot of it, it's about time. Dave, what say you about this?
Hey, you know, look, they're expanding the franchise. I have mixed feelings about it. I hope that they keep a lot of the Star Wars stuff in the Star Wars land, you know, which makes it appropriate. You keep it in that environment, you know, and have those meet and greets there. Look, it's appealing to the fan base. I don't know what else to say about it.
It's interesting, all these characters from different eras coming together. You already have Ahsoka and Mandalorian and Grogu coming to the park. That's going to have a lot of ramifications as the film hits theaters this year, really kind of ramping up interest in that era of Star Wars. I feel that initially, I know they wanted the Imagineers envisioned this to be an original trilogy type of experience with those characters. But then all of a sudden they went and did an about face and kind of overlaid this new land of Batuu over the original plans and kind of put this sequel trilogy that J.J. Abrams had envisioned in there, and they didn't quite get the returns that they were hoping for. They're hoping maybe this will kind of bring about some things. My thing is, it needs to have some energy. It needs to look and feel like Star Wars. And I really thought it was 65% of the way there. It didn't have some of that energy. And I know that they part of it is they opened it up and they didn't have all the attractions in place and all the characters in place, and they ultimately never did.
Yeah, they flubbed the opening of that land pretty badly, and there were some people that exited the company because of it. But the thing I would just comment here, there is enough IP with Star Wars that they could just build an entire theme park that's Star Wars based.
Yeah.
Star Wars land, whatever you want to call it, and you could do a hub and spoke like Disneyland and have the different, timelines. You could have, the Andor and the, Mandalorian and, the originals and, all of that. I think it would be pretty fantastic if they just built one theme park. They should build it, build it in Texas, build it in the middle of the country or something, and make it a massive Star Wars theme park.
Yeah, definitely. They've got so much great IP. Who knows what the future is, but I hope it's something that people will gravitate toward and really dig in. And hopefully this time they will live their Star Wars story. Let's open it up.
And by the way, I just want to say, I have no inside information. I don't know if they're ever going to do it, but I'm just commenting. I think they should do it. Maybe they're thinking about doing it. I don't know.
Maybe they'll bring Dave back from writing books.
No. I don't know anything about Star Wars. I just enjoy watching the movies.
But you know what? They hired a bunch of people that didn't know a whole lot about Star Wars, and they did okay for themselves. The thing is, about story, about the experience. It's let's make it deliberate, intentional. Let's have some authenticity behind it, and that will always be great for the experience of people. Interesting stuff happening there at Disney and Lucasfilm this time out. Certainly looking forward to it.
Skull Rock Podcast.
You're like that little arrow on your hat. Straight and shining, and that's the way I'll always remember you.
I'll always remember you.
I'll always remember you.
I'll always remember you, Sharon.
They hang you, I'll always remember you.
In memoriam.
You had the tragic news of a colleague of yours passing away this week. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, this is just absolutely devastating. It was shocking to wake up to on Sunday morning. But Roger Allers, who was one of the co-directors of The Lion King, one of the directors of the Lion King movie, the 1994 original film, and also wrote the book for the Lion King stage production. He passed away late Saturday night, apparently, and it's just incredibly devastating. He was 76 years old, but you wouldn't know it by looking at him. He was a vibrant individual, kind, funny. I have nothing but positive memories about him and working with him. I worked very closely with him on a number of projects, including The Little Match Girl. And he was one of the nicest directors I've ever worked with. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, it's a fact. He was an individual who, in my mind, he had a positive energy about him. He had this positive kindness to him. And he was somebody who was just great fun, whether you were just chatting with him in the hallway and having a laugh, or you were talking with him about a scene in a project he was directing, he was always respectful of you. He was always kind. If he didn't like something, he told you he didn't like it, but he did it in such a positive and kind way. He was very collaborative. He was just a really joyful individual that I had always envisioned Roger being that guy that was going to be in his late 80s or early 90s, on stage talking about the good old days of animation and this and that. And I just am so shocked by the fact that he passed away suddenly like this. And Aljon, I was trading emails with Roger last week while he was traveling in Egypt. And, I wanted to get him onto the show. And I have a note on my calendar next week, actually next week from Friday, the end of the month. I put a note on my calendar to email Roger to set up the interview because we were going to have him come back on the Skull Rock podcast. We did a very extensive interview about his career a few years back. But I was going to have him come back just to talk about the film The Prophet because one of our listeners asked if we could get Roger to come back. And so I was working on that. So it's just absolutely devastating news. And, it's sad to lose a friend, clearly, but I'm hopeful that he is on to the next journey for himself. And, it was just devastating news to wake up to because when I woke up early on Sunday morning, I had a text from Don Hahn breaking the news. And then I started seeing, pictures of Roger on social media. And it just blew me away. It was just out of left field. I was just really sad to hear this news because he was just such a wonderful individual. He's going to really he's going to be missed by so many people. I mean, I think there are so many colleagues of ours that are just devastated that, finding out the news on Sunday. There's just absolute devastation across the industry of people who knew him. So, rest in peace, Roger. I mean, you were a good man. You were incredibly talented individual and somebody who I just enjoyed talking and working with over the years. I knew him practically my entire career in animation. So it's just sad.
I believe did you all work on Rescuers Down Under together? Was it Rescuers Down Under? You guys in that project together?
I was on Rescuers Down Under, and I think Roger worked on that. I'm not sure if he was in the story department. He was somebody who he had animated. He had gone into story. He had worked on story for so many different projects, and then he started directing. It's just again, it's just devastating news.
Yeah, team. Check out the Roger Allers episode and listen back to his stories. He's worked on Oliver and Company, Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Prince and the Pauper. So many of the projects you've heard here. Working alongside George Scribner on really cool projects as well, including Aladdin. He's done so much, and we're definitely quite honored to have him on as a guest, and looking forward to having the opportunity to pay tribute to him in an upcoming episode.
And I think what we're going to do is we're going to probably rerun our interview with Roger at some point in a couple of weeks and see if we can get some colleagues on to talk about Roger a little bit before we run each episode.
100%. Also, this week's passings, we celebrate Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, the comic strip, who passes away at the age of 68. He's been running a newspaper since 89, all the way to 2023, and it sprang from the office monotony of his job as an applications engineer for Pacific Bell. And over the years, he's done just so many things. And I think that Dilbert, was one of the era's just important kind of figures in terms of comic strips, because it really did bring about that kind of office, if you will, kind of humor that we come to know and love in different sitcoms, about, being in an office and working into these crazy personalities. So I think he'll be known for that. Of course, later he's turned his influence into podcasting and different things of that nature, being more of a political figure. But having said that, I think a lot of people will still recall his greatest contribution, which is really Dilbert. So,
yeah, and the thing I'll add to that is that he died from prostate cancer. So, folks, prostate cancer sneaks up on people. You don't know you have it until sometimes it's too late. And his was discovered when it was stage 4. And it had already breached the prostate gland, and that's it. He was done. It went to his bones, and it was an aggressive form of prostate cancer, and it was something that Joe Biden has the same type of prostate cancer. So the thing I would say to all of our guys out there that are listening, get your prostate checked.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Another young artist found dead at the age of 68 was Susie and the Banshees drummer Kenny Morris. Susie and the Banshees, just an amazing band, bringing about that British punk sensibility back in the 80s, a band that I listened to quite a bit. It's very, very sad. No cause of death has been revealed as of yet, according to the New York Post. Kenny, quote, was a friend of ours, and it has always been a pleasure to see him hang out with us when visiting Cork, Ireland, where he had been living. This is John Robb, the music journalist and late drummer's longtime friend, had made an announcement with this tribute. He was sweet, articulate, artistic, and fascinating company, and his beautiful eccentricity was adorable. I don't know, Dave, if you remember Susie and the Banshees. Peekaboo was one of their big hits during the late 70s punk era. I know it swept over New York and your neck of the woods.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember that band very well.
Yeah, for sure. Born in Essex, Morey studied fine art and filmmaking before going into the punk rock scene, which was, of course, a mixture of pop and punk and art, all these things kind of melding together, which brought about Susie and the Banshees, definitely bringing in all those influences. And may he rest in peace. The age 68, way too young, guys, way too young. Well, having said that, team, let's move into our highlight of the week. Let's move into Ed Nowak, former Deputy General Counsel for the Walt Disney Company, in part 2 of his interview this week at Skull Rock Podcast. Enjoy.
Let's do it.
Hey, let's chat.
Let's chat afterwards. Let's chat. And he said, let's chat again.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, we are back for week 2. And honestly, I don't know how many weeks this is going to go, because this is a fascinating conversation with the former Deputy General Counsel of the Walt Disney Company, Ed Nowak, who I am honored to call a friend. Ed, welcome back to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Thank you. And the hot chocolate was delicious.
Awesome. Which we try and get the green room cleaned up as best we can, but we're just a couple of knucklehead podcasters, So, anyway, Ed, last week we kind of ended with you joining the Walt Disney Company early on, and really at the sort of the early stages of VHS home entertainment, and all of the Disney catalogs starting to be put out on VHS, and there was an enormous amount of money being generated by that. What kind of issues started popping up?
Well, every contract was different. And these contracts that involved music or recording in one way or another, some of them went back to the earliest days of sound. And when you started to see movies in the home, of course, there had been 8mm and 16mm sound movies in the home, but that was a tiny market.
Mm-hmm.
And there just wasn't enough incentive for various voice artists or music performers, just didn't provide incentive to try to get a share of the profits.
Mm-hmm.
We know when VCRs became, as ubiquitous as toasters in the home, that, millions of dollars were being generated that nobody ever thought they would see. So the incentive was there, and people would go back and look at their old contracts, and one way or another would try to shoehorn into parts of contracts that dealt with recording rights or record deals, sound only, audio only. So, well, this is just one big, you watch you watch a cassette on your VCR, it's like one big record. You know? And if you look at the language sideways and squint, you say, well, we should be getting like record royalties for motion pictures. And then you look at another part of the contract, which basically said, whatever you're doing for us as a performer or a writer or a composer for the motion picture, that's it. You were paid for the motion picture. And what's on the cassettes is the motion picture. It's not listening to an audio only source. Now, I'm oversimplifying because some of these contracts were written, in the earliest days of sound recording, electrical sound recording, motion picture sound recording, and the language would vary. It would vary on who you were, and the language would also vary in contracts in which Disney was acquiring rights to music. And I don't want to get too far ahead on that, but one of the big cases involved a company called Bourne.
Oh, yeah.
It was a music publisher.
Sure. And Walt had sold off some of the music early on.
Snow White and Pinocchio.
Because he needed the cash.
And licensed it back for his uses for the movies. Maybe we should leap ahead on that because it was so critical a case. Disney was a tiny company in the early 30s.
Yeah.
And Walt did not have a music publishing arm. So he sought out through an introduction by somebody, this fellow called Saul Bornstein, who was one of the big publishers. He had the top composers of the Irving Berlin before Irving Berlin had his own company. I mean, Bourne was the top music publishing catalog. But what Walt did was, I need somebody to publish. And in those days, sheet music was the real source of income.
That was big business, right? Yeah.
So that was the way the royalties were measured by, number of copies sold. The record royalties kind of came on as an adjunct to that, and eventually became the dominant profit base. For Three Little Pigs and a lot of the early silly symphonies, and then as well Snow White, and most important in this series of claims, Pinocchio, company composers created the music. Walt's staff composers, the guys are employees of the company. They wrote the music.
Yeah, Frank Churchill and Oliver Wallace and people like that, yeah.
So Walt's deals with the Bourne Company, each of which were separate contracts, no two of which were exactly alike because the business is evolving and, the lawyers are trying to figure out the best way to articulate what's happening. But at bottom, what's happening is Walt is allowing Bourne to copyright Walt's music. So Bourne retains the copyrights. Walt has the right to use the music in the language of one contract in his productions. Doesn't say how many or when. He has the right to use them in his productions. And the company does. If you listen to shorts done later in the 30s, 40s, into the 50s, you hear Snow White music. There's one cartoon, I think, from the late 40s and early 50s in which Donald Duck sings When You Wish Upon
Yes.
So it's clearly being used. And then when television comes along, When You Wish Upon a Star becomes the company theme.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 10, 20, 30, 40 years go by without a complaint. Bourne understands that this is, he's the publisher. This is Walt's music. And then in the middle 80s, for the first time, his daughter, who was running the company, has a lawyer write a letter saying, "You've been using our music all this time without paying us. This is all copyrighted." Well, this was a multi-year problem with a lot at stake.
Mm-hmm.
And it involved music written 10, 20, 30 years before, and contracts written 10, 20, 30 years before. And a lot of people aren't around anymore to testify to what really happened and what the real meaning of the contracts should be. And this situation was tried in a federal court in New York twice, actually. It started with a mistrial after several weeks, and then we came back and tried it all over again from the beginning and prevailed on the basis that it really was Walt's music.
Mm-hmm.
You really could use it at the parks and on television. The only thing you couldn't do, and this was legitimate, is if you used it to advertise the company as opposed to being part of the, if we just, the Super Bowl advertisements you used to see in the 80s and 90s, where you go on and go, if you heard "When You Wish Upon a Star," that's advertising.
Okay.
And so, okay, you pay the publisher for the advertising. That's not Walt's production. That's
an ad. Yeah.
But the rest of it was ours, and it was affirmed in the appellate court. But it was a very, very critical case for the company. Had it gone the other way, we didn't own the music. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
what are you going to be blackmailed into paying exorbitant, non-market prices because they know you need this music that you've been using all along.
Right.
But this case ties me back. I want to go back to when I came to the company.
Yeah.
This all comes together. Knowing that we were entering this era, there was another case going on at the time I got to it. It had already started before I got there, in which Disney was the plaintiff against a company called Filmation. You know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Saturday morning,
a number of people that are listening to our show worked at Filmation, and probably worked on these couple of films you're going to talk about.
Well, maybe so. Their Filmation had announced, and was actually, I think, in production on one of them, a series of what were in effect, they didn't articulate it this way, but a series of full-length theatrical features which were follow-ups to, if not outright sequels to, coincidentally, 8 of the classic Disney films. The first one being, I forget which was first. One was Snow White and the Seven Dwarf Elves.
Right.
And the other was Pinocchio and what the heck?
I can't remember the
I
title.
forget the whole title.
Yeah.
So they were already at work on a couple of these, but they had released a series of one-sheets, some of which were like pencil-only one-sheets. And Disney, which had been a very reluctant plaintiff in court cases up to that time, felt it had to do something about this. This is too much. It's too close. And when you looked at the one sheets, I walked in cold from the outside and said, I know what I can do this. I could draw this. This is really, these are really impermissible. So I come to the company when it's in the throes of the Steinberg thing, which is up one of my alleys on securities and shareholder cases. And the other is this new thing for me with animation and the actual, content of the movie business. And I had one of the things that I thought was important to grasp early on. Remember, the company is still a very unsettled place. All these new people are coming in from a totally different culture. But an awful lot of people are there from, the existing culture, the Walt culture, and then, what remained of that in the 20 years following his death. And what I understood was, if you're going to succeed here, you really have to have a foot in both camps. The Disney people have to be convinced you're not only not their enemy, but you're there because you understand them and you want to help.
Yeah.
On the Paramount side, the Hollywood side, you had to be careful not to seem to be too sympathetic to the earlier era, because from the studio side, and especially live action, they were there to change all that. And so, you
were walking
had to balance the two.
You were walking a fine line. I mean, look, when Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Frank Wells first came in, they wanted to shut down the animation division.
Well, yes, and you could, that was palpable. I met Ed Hansen, and then was introduced to Peter Schneider, who had just come in, and met and talked with Ron and John about what was then Basil of Baker Street.
Yeah, which became Great Mouse Detective.
And so, it was palpable that, we weren't sure what was going to happen to this whole business. Here you're worried about Saul Steinberg coming in, and who knows what he would do with. And now then the real new management comes in, and you're still worried about what's going to happen to animation. But since many of them were still there and remained there, I thought, I got to learn everything I can from these guys to develop the credibility on the subject of making an animated movie, so that anything we had to present, whether it was on the Filmation side or anything else we were going to do, that you could present it with integrity and conviction. And if you're in front of a jury, you got to be credible. They got to believe that
convincing.
You're honest,
Yeah.
and you know what you're talking about. So I was fortunate in the first weeks I was there. Peter Nolan arranged for me. He said, "You got to meet Frank and Ollie." And I did. Remember, these are people I'm watching
back
on
in
TV,
the 50s, back in the 50s on the Disneyland show. Yeah.
And here they are to give me lessons in animation. I remember Ollie brought the book, The Illusion of Life. He said, "Read the book and we'll talk to you." And they did. And we had many sessions, how it was done, how the music was added, how the process worked, how they developed characters, movement. So I spent weeks in their company on and off, just learning everything I possibly could.
You were in the weeds with Frank and Ollie, learning the Disney animation process.
Yeah. And that led to my introduction to Roy, because we would develop stuff for some of these cases, including the Filmation case. I was a great believer, even back in my trial days in New York, in using visuals, anything that could help the jury understand something with a visual. And then when tape became more prevalent, use tape recorders. So we would put together things that we wanted to play for the court or play for the jury. And we had this one segment of excerpts from Disney films and excerpts from the Filmation work that had already been done that we were allowed access to, which you were allowed in discovery and litigation, putting together some comparisons. I worked with a guy from the story department. Do you ever know Mr. Coffey, Ed Coffey?
Oh, yeah, Ed Coffey.
Yeah, Ed Coffey helped developing the theme that would run through these exhibits. And so I was introduced to Mr. Disney for the first time, and I took this to him because I wanted to make sure that anything we were doing was consistent with, the flame that he was keeping. How do you treat the characters? How do we speak to the court about? We couldn't do it like other companies could do because we were Disney.
Yeah. But at that point, Roy really was chairman of the animation department.
Yep. So
right? I mean, he was
yes.
vice chairman of the company, but he was chairman of the animation company. And really, we referred to him, he was sort of the godfather because he protected animation from being shut down.
And to me, this was, I had to do this service to him as well as a service to the company. Let's get it right, and let's do it in a way that's, the man is running that area.
Yeah,
so let's not go out and make enemies if we don't have to. And so this first thing that we took to him, he said, "Play that again." So we did. And he said, "Do you mind if I take this home? I want to show it to Patty," his wife at the time. He said, "This is good." And he came back and he said, "She liked it too. Go ahead. This is really good." So we kind of hit it off. And as a result of that early experience, Frank and Ollie became good friends. They acted as witnesses in lawsuits. We traveled together for sometimes weeks on end. Used to go over to the houses that, back to back. But Jeanette Thomas was always giving me vegetables to take home, from the garden outside. But sometimes we'd just consult. We'd go over a case they weren't even going to be involved in, but spend a day with them. What did you do? And how did you handle Louis Prima in The Jungle Book? Because that became an issue in the 90s. How did that all work? How did Walt find them? How did you guys deal with characterizations where they liked the musicians? And there are a lot of interesting stories about that, the creation, the adding of the music to Jungle Book. But my point here is that what was coming together was my early devotion to the Disney idea and the company.
Yeah.
On the music, on the interest in animation and how the company functioned and how people did things, and to translate it into the kind of presentation, the kind of theater that a lawsuit becomes. And we had a style that was unlike anybody else's.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, you were being immersed in the culture of Disney. Forget about, all the Paramount people coming in and changing live action. You were being immersed into the animation culture that had been there since the beginning of the company.
And it was wonderful.
Yeah.
There isn't a classic movie that we didn't have to deal with some aspect, either of the characters, the animation, the music rights, which required you to delve into the whole history of the project, because you never knew what you were going to pull out, things that were going to emerge as you studied the making of the film that were going to become important even in interpreting contract language.
I have to ask you this question because it would seem to me that things that went on in the 1930s were probably done looser, much looser than they would have been in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? Or today. I mean, did you encounter things where you were just like, oh my gosh, they did a handshake and wrote it on a napkin?
Almost. Yeah, I mean, look, they were inventing they were making it up, not making it up. They were trying hard, but they were doing it, for the first time, the second time, the third time. Some of those old contracts are like 2 pages.
Yeah.
And if you did it today, it's 56 pages. It's
Or
80
more. Or
pages.
more. Yeah, I was going to say.
All of the technical issues that, and they're always playing catch up because the technology and the filmmaking methods are changing a whole lot faster than people are changing the ways they're looking at how to make a deal to make those movies.
But in those early contracts, they never really anticipated the all the technological changes that would be coming down the pipeline, like VHS and DVD and Blu-ray and streaming and all of these things.
Never with specificity, or if they were specific, it was as to something that had, recently entered the market, that had recently been invented. There came to be used a phrase, and I don't remember when this came in. It had nothing to do with me. It was before that. They realized as new technologies came along that they had to try to anticipate something, even though they didn't know what it was or what it would be. And so the phrase came in, we have all rights to the movie, to the motion picture itself, whether on, film or tape or any other device not 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 known, not currently known, not invented. Different people would phrase it differently.
Yeah.
But the idea was you're anticipating that any way we're going to get that motion picture in front of you, if it's a motion picture, we're covered. It belongs to the company. Now, before streaming, who would have known that streaming would replace, physical or, the movement of film or the movement of tape,
Right.
digitizing. Nobody, that you didn't know exactly how it was going to be done. And we don't know how it's going to be in 10 years. What's going to replace what we call streaming? I mean, something is.
There'll be
is gonna happen.
something that'll come along. We
Right.
don't know what that is. Yeah. So those types of contracts from the 30s, 40s, 50s really became problems in the 80s and 90s.
Because they either weren't specific or what they were specific about was challenged. In the Peggy Lee case, which was probably the first of this long sequence in which a voice artist said, I get royalties on the motion picture because it's like an audio only. Her contract focused on something called transcriptions, which in the radio days, especially to overcome the time difference between East Coast and West Coast, radio programs began to be recorded on these big 16-inch, they look like 78 RPM records, but they're like 16-inch, heavy, one-sided, and you could record a half-hour radio show on them. And Peggy Lee was an artist, the recording artist for Decca Records at the time. As well, she was doing transcriptions. And I forget, I mean, these are long paragraphs, and I forget the exact language. But the issue was over her rights to continue to make transcriptions, which she said, well, that's phonograph records, and that you made an exception, and so there must be an exception to your movie rights when you put it on tape, and that was roughly the issue. Was more complicated than that, and so there's an instance of a contract where it's not just whether the technology was invented; it's the fact that there were elements of the contract that focused on smaller division of rights. Who retained what? What were you left free to do that wouldn't have belonged to Walt? And here was Walt and Peggy Lee had a fine relationship. She was, involved. The who was it? Who drew Peg, the dog? I forget which one, but it was
she
had to be loosely based on her personality.
I think it was Eric Larson, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right.
It was Eric Larson. Yeah. And so, typically the animators would pick up mannerisms and some personality traits of the voice actors in the animation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still done today.
Yeah, and which was one of the things that they played up in their case, which was kind of extra contractual. I mean, it had nothing to do with the contract as such, but she basically said, "Look, I'm a formative influence on this movie. Walt had me on his show, saying that look how we recorded the voices, how we double tracked some of the." And she said, "Well, yeah, I'm so important. That's my movie. Why do I not get the share of the profits on tape?"
Did they actually show some of that footage from?
Oh, we did a lot of
from the
video
Disney
back
show?
and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, at the this gets too complicated. By the time it got to trial, the case was no longer about what the contract meant, because the judge who sat in the part of the court in LA Superior who entertained what are called summary judgment motions, where you try to dispose of issues to make a trial unnecessary.
Yeah.
And this judge, in my opinion, bollocksed everything up. He thought that the Disney motion for summary judgment was Peggy Lee's motion for summary judgment.
Oh, no.
He thought we hadn't submitted the requisite clear proof on this issue of phonograph records versus transcriptions versus movies, when the pile of material was on his clerk's desk while we're in the courtroom, and the clerk is pointing at it. It's over here. And in the practice in the LA Superior Court, after that ruling, that's it. You're on your way. You just lost the key issue. So what you're going to have a trial on is how much you have to pay her. It's damages. You couldn't appeal until after the whole case is over.
Oh, my gosh.
So so by the time we get to trial, the issue is, how much is this worth? And Peggy Lee had asked for, I don't know, like $40 million or 30-something million dollars. And I forget what the profit at the time was on the release of Lady and the Tramp. But, it was a serious amount of money. Well, the trial was full of excerpts from Lady and the Tramp. But the last piece of evidence that we put on was the piece that ran at the end of the Disney MGM Studios studio tour. What was that called? What was the title of that? It had all the animators in it. Had kind of the history of animation. Had Ruben Aquino showing you how he did Ursula, and a whole.
What was it? The animation tour film?
Yeah, the one at the end that you saw as you were getting, not the prequel with Robin Williams, but
and Walter Cronkite.
Yeah, no, this was at the end, and there was this beautiful piece.
Yeah, I can't recall the name of it. Yeah,
and it only occurred to me, like, it came back to me. I'd seen this thing, and we wanted to show the jury it's the animators.
Right.
Yeah, the voice artists are important, but the key to these movies and their enduring value is the animators. So we had this great tribute to the animators, and I got somebody from animation. It wasn't Bernie. Somebody. We went to WDI at like 10 o'clock on a Saturday night and pulled out the whatever the original materials were that went into, because it was
right.
It was
the original,
their position, WDI's position.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's our closing. That's what the jury's going to see.
And they saw
And so
it.
Monday morning we played this. And so her $40 million claim was reduced to, I think the jury gave her $3.2 billion, which was still a lot of money. And
Sure,
you don't want
sure.
to lose $3.2 billion.
Right.
But we managed to turn the case into a fraction of what it was purported to be.
And I want to clarify something, because earlier you said, she was after so much of the profits. Was it the profits from the VHS release, or was it accumulation of the film release up until the VHS and then what the VHS generated? Or was she just going after the VHS?
It was the VHS.
Yeah. Okay.
It was the VHS. Anything from the original movie releases
was
would have been
covered.
time barred.
Right. Okay.
But the VHS was still current.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she was within the time limit to bring the.
And was she pissed off, or did she appeal?
Well, no, she didn't, because she won.
But
she didn't win what she wanted.
But she didn't win $40 million.
Right,
Was she disappointed by that?
She was highly disappointed. Peggy Lee was unhappy through this whole period. And we saw her in court a number of times. She wasn't well. You can cut this out later if you think this isn't worth listening to, but we had a kind of a reconciliation about 5 years later, toward the end of her life. We had re-released Lady and the Tramp. She had a different lawyer. She had her music lawyer, not her litigation lawyer, as her main lawyer. And he and I had a conversation, and I said, we're going to re-release this thing. I want to give her copy number 1, so marked on a gold. That was it. It was, I think it was the earliest DVD.
It was the first release of Lady and the Tramp on DVD.
And so I said, we want to give this to her. No hard feelings. She's an important part of the legacy.
Yeah.
And I never saw her again, but the lawyer called me back and said, she loves you all. This is worth more than the $3 million.
Wow.
And then, couldn't have been a year later, the guy I mentioned early on, Joe Shapiro, who had 2 forms of cancer sequentially, and he was in his last days at the St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, and I would visit him. And I found out that at the other end of the same floor, Peggy Lee was also dying in her room. Now, what do you want to the odds?
That's crazy. Did you go visit her?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't think that was.
No.
She may have loved us, but
not that much.
Anyway.
Wow. That's just absolutely amazing. Ed, I'm looking at the clock, and one of the things I want to get into next week is going to be some of the crazy lawsuits, because I think one of the things I find fascinating, and some people just chalk it up and say, well, it's just the cost of doing business, but these frivolous lawsuits that the company gets hit with on a regular basis that keeps a staff of attorneys employed, it kind of adds to the cost of doing business, which means that, when ticket prices go up, it's because all of these costs are happening. And it's not just legal, but it's just across the board. But the legal part of it contributes to it. And I really do want to talk a little bit about some of those things, because there's some real crazy ones that you and I have talked about over the years. And it's like, I think some of those are public. and we can touch on them. So if you don't mind, I'd love to pick up next week and talk about those.
Okay. And
what do you want in the green room?
I'll come. Well, by now I could do with a hamburger and a milkshake. So
Okay. We'll do it. We'll do it. All right. So I will talk to you next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Dave.
Let's get out of here!
Come on, Scotty, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here, Lieutenant.
Part 2 in the can. And
again, just fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it's just a great conversation with Ed.
Absolutely, gang. We have more of Ed Nowak in the weeks to come. Looking forward to it. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear more of what he's got going on. And Dave, I can't wait for us to talk more Disney and filmmaking. And if you've reached this far into the show, thank you so much. I was going to say there's so much more you can check out there on our YouTube page. Check it out. Be friends with us. Like, share, and subscribe to the show. We've got clips, videos coming up, more short content, I should say, video content with our reviews about all kinds of stuff there on our YouTube page. Another great thing is videos only of our podcast on Spotify. Spotify's hosting video versions of our long-form podcast. Not all of our interviews are video yet, but hopefully they will be soon in this year. We're going to be uploading more video content, so be on the lookout for that on our YouTube and Spotify channels. You'll really, really dig it. You can follow me, Aljon Go, on Instagram, and also my other podcast, Dining at Disney, where we talk about food and the Disney parks. We'll be talking more about the Festival of the Arts currently taking place over there at Epcot, as well as what's happening with Star Wars and Galaxy's Edge over at Disneyland. That is the Dining at Disney podcast. Every week, new shows everywhere you find podcasts, and our big friends supporting this show and Dining at Disney. That's Sorcerer Radio at srsounds.com. Dave?
Yeah, as always, you can hear me throughout the month on the Tunes Behind the Tunes on SiriusXM Disney Hits Channel 133. All during the month of January, we're featuring the song Best of Friends, sung by Pearl Bailey from Disney's animated film, The Fox and the Hound. So check that out. Again, the Tunes Behind the Tunes on SiriusXM, Disney Hits, Channel 133. Also, if you want any of my books, you want signed copies of some of my books, go to theoldmillpress.com. You can also get author-signed copies of the newly released The Art of John Canemaker, an Animator's Garden, and you can also get a signed copy of A Spoonful of Sugar, the story of the Upjohn Pharmacy in Disneyland by Stephen Hall. So check those books out, and of course you can always go to davidbossert.com anytime for free content and free stuff you can send away for. And with that, Aljon, I'm just going to say go out, have a fantastic week, everybody. Be kind to one another. Be careful in your area if it's snowing, because it was snowing like crazy this weekend over in New York City. Be careful. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.